Hmm. Right.
Hello and welcome. You are watching the Policy Times evening, a very special discussion. It's called Policy Times Feces Roundtable. And I'm really excited and happy that in our first episode, we have the best. So when you are starting with the best, then definitely you set a different standard with it. The purpose is actually to understand how Indian universities are functioning and how to actually exchange and share the best practices that some of the best Indian universities are doing. I'm really happy. Myself is Akram Haq. I'm the editor of the Policy Times, and I'm joined by Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, who is the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. OP Jindal, JGU in short, we call it, is one of India's first private university which has ranked in the global QS ranking and in all almost global university ranking parameter. Joined with him and me is also Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, who is the regional director at QS Intelligence Unit, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. And he's also CEO for QS iGOT. We'll come to know more about the details. We all know about the QS intelligence and the international university ranking that we have. Recently, QS has come out with the university ranking, the 2020 Global University Ranking, where around 9 to 10 universities have come, other than the IITs. We will actually, the very purpose of this today's discussion is what are the basic traits of being a global university? Why are some universities global while others not? What are the kind of benefits or like education standard that the best universities set? Then what would be the different criteria or parameter post COVID? Because COVID-19 crisis is certainly not a very small phenomena in the sector of education. Not only just like education, the way this COVID-19 crisis is impacting the society. I mean, normally many people are saying that it's a third world war. So definitely a lot will change in the sector of education. So we will also try to understand from our experts that how post COVID-19 crisis the global university ranking would be, and what would that also impact in the very offerings or parameter of being a global university.
Hmm.
And then, so to talk on that, I think let me just introduce our speakers in a little more details. Professor Raj, I mean, he needs no introduction. He is actually one of the smartest brains that India has ever produced. He is the professor and vice chancellor of PGT Global University. He's a Rhodes scholar, and I think, may I request all our audience to be kindly in mute? Kindly, if you can keep yourself in mute. So he has become VC at the age of 34 in 2019 when the university was established. And Jeju is, as said, that is one of the 20 universities in India and only non-STEM and non-medical in universities ranking in the global parameter, and it also announced as the Institute of Eminence by the government of India. He's a legal scholar and works in the field of human rights and also on the development in the development and comparative constitutional law, terrorism and national security issues. The most important part is that his academic qualifications are from all the best universities of the world, starting from the University of Oxford to Harvard to University of Hong Kong, and starting definitely from University of Delhi and Loyola College. I'll quickly also introduce our second speaker of the evening, Dr. Ashwini Fernandez. As I told you, He has been working tirelessly and tremendously globally to improve the standard of education uh, in the world. And I think when we talk about ranking the universities is the best way to set a benchmark that which one is better and which one is not. Without wasting any more time, I want to come to our experts and pose 2 3 questions. But before that, let me just mute everyone so that there is no disturbance. And I will request Dr. Fernandez and Professor Rajkumar to unmute yourself. I've only given the rights to unmute yourself. Excellent.
We don't see Dr. Fernandez here. Has he left or?
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Fernandez is here. So I'll pose a certain questions. First, like 40 minutes, we'll have an interaction. Then we will open for question and answer with the audience that we are joined by in YouTube as well as here. First question that I want to pose is that to both of you, maybe Professor Raj will start and then I'll request Dr. Fernandez on this, is what are the basic features or traits to be a truly global university in the current context? Professor Raj.
Well, thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here with you, Akram, and of course, Ashwin and Dr. Ferdinand. Thank you, Policy Times, for hosting this. So let me begin by saying that, there have been scholars and scholarly work which have identified the features and characteristics of a global university. But if I were to reflect about the features of a global university, I would start by saying that the most important aspect of a global university is its vision and mission, which should not be confined to any geographical boundaries. And with that vision and mission, it immediately connects to its ability to attract global talent in the form of global faculty as well as students to be able to be part of that institution. So if we say that the leading universities, some of them, and so not all universities can actually aspire to be global unless they are prepared to make a commitment to that vision and mission. That's the two features. Then the third one is its ability to build substantive partnerships with universities around the world. And that's a very critical aspect, because if you are confined to one country and then expect that whatever happens is mostly from that country, be it student mobility, or for that matter, students coming in or faculty coming in. So in some ways, if you want to be a global university, you need to recognize that you need to commit yourself and work towards developing all forms of mobility, be it student exchange programs, dual degree programs, study abroad programs, study immersion programs. Two-way mobility becomes a very critical factor. That's the third. The fourth important factor of a global university is its strong and substantive commitment to research and knowledge creation, leading to publication. This requires greater funding, greater resources, as well as greater institutional commitment with regard to what is needed. And the fifth, in my view, being a global university is its unabashed embracement of rankings and benchmarking. There is no if and but when it comes to rankings and benchmarking, because, at the end of the day, you need to benchmark yourself internationally if you want to be a global university. And I'm not saying everybody needs to. It depends upon your vision and mission. That's why I started with the first and most important feature is to get your vision and mission right. If you can't expect to be an internationally benchmarked global university in your vision and then say you don't want to be part of rankings, these two things will become contradictory. And one of the big challenges that we face in India today is that there are too many contradictory visions and missions which are not helping us achieve and fulfill our goals and aspirations.
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you so much, Akram, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be on the Policy Times show today. Well, I would just like to echo whatever Professor Raj said, because I think it's a fundamental principle of any global university. And people say that why and what is the reason for universities to have, or for university rankings to have the indicators that it currently does. And I think what from the QS lens, we believe that these indicators act as a lens into what's happening on the global landscape of universities and internationalization and so on. Now, when we look at the QS ranking methodology, and it's been through a phase of development. People have spoken about this methodology, and I'm not here today to tell you that this is the best lens to look at how a global university is, but it's definitely a useful lens. It's a useful methodology. And when we look at globally competing universities, we've seen that this methodology has worked very well. We look at countries around the world, and we look at some of the best universities around the world. UNESCO figures state that there are about 28 to 30,000 universities and hundreds and thousands of institutions of higher learning. And when that happens, I think what we want to know is, on a global landscape, which are these universities which have made a global impact? And just to echo Professor Raj's comments, what makes a global university? It might be that it's not everybody's cup of tea. One of them definitely being research, and that is looked at. Literally all the global rankings look at research to some degree or the other. And I think good research can be measured through the citation impact. You can argue that the citation measure is not the best measure. There could be other ways to look at it. And I think we are learning, and we're looking at different other measures as well through national ratings, like we do with our QS iGauge platform, where we go beyond just the impact of research into what makes a university national first and try to recognize it. So besides research, internationalization to an extent, because mobility in the current sense is people moving, from where they are into a new place, and with that, there's always been an argument in India that international faculty, we have so many national faculty which are extremely good. Why do we need to have international faculty? And the argument here is that international faculty, or people from other countries coming into your country, brings a different perspective. People bring different kinds of knowledge set, different cultural backgrounds, and that just not helps in imparting education, but also into showing a different perspective to what you are. So international faculty has been one of the main indicators, or one of the indicators of our rankings, and looking at how global universities impact mobility. International students, and we know how important international students are to economies of countries as well, and the impact of research, internationalization on the reputation within the academic community. And that has a rather considerable amount of weightage in the QS rankings. People have argued that it should be replaced with something more objective. And when we are looking at a global landscape of universities, there ought to be a simplified way to collect and validate data. And the academic reputation component, what we have, does allow us to do that. And finally, the most important element, at least till now, at least till pre-COVID age, or even during COVID age, what we're looking at and what students were always looking at is employability. And a global view on employability. So these are some of the indicators we've been looking at in measuring what makes a global university. It might not be perfect, but it's given us a list of the top 1,000 universities in the world, which have created a massive impact in all these parameters, including one which I've forgotten, is a faculty-student ratio as a proxy to teaching. So again, echoing exactly how my co-panelist, Professor Rajas mentioned, rankings is a measure of what an institution is doing. And if you want to be global, you need to start benchmarking yourself with others. And rankings just provides that opportunity.
Excellent. I think we had a very comprehensive view on that. I'll start again with Dr. Fernandez on this important question, is that COVID-19 is just not any other incident, how deep is the impact of COVID in the education sector, especially when we talk about the global ranking perspective, and how deep do you think, or how far do you think the global standards will change post-COVID? Because as the post-COVID world we see, I think online education is going to have an immense impact on the very way of we are providing the education.
Yeah. I think the impact of COVID-19 on higher education cannot probably be expressed in this call. There are several research papers, there are several newspaper articles, and we've been reading and studying of this situation for a while now. And let's look at India, and let's look at the impact this will have on India. And very clearly, we can see that Indian students, will not go, or most probably would not go abroad this year. And to a research we recently did, I would encourage all of you who are listening and watching us today to download this report on the Indian student mobility report, which we came out in May, which looks at comprehensively looked at students from all the states of India, all the age groups from undergraduate to postgraduate, from the IITs to the smallest institution, and we asked them several questions on one is what are the study abroad plans, and two, how do they find online education? And these questions are broken into smaller questions as well. And let me give you a gist of this. At least 50% of the students have been impacted, or their decision would be impacted by COVID-19, and they would. And this was back in May when the situation was still better. Their intention to travel abroad would be impacted. And if you ask the same question now, I think that number has probably grown with how COVID has impacted everyone. Around the world, you can see what's happening. We can look at in the UK, you've seen a news article which says, and I think the number is about 12 universities would probably go bankrupt because of no international, or the prospects of not having enough number of international students this year. We're looking at in the US, the government has taken a decision because of online classes. They're going to ask international students to leave. Australia, as well, as having a challenge. Perhaps New Zealand, with the zero COVID case right now, might be the only destination where students can go to. But all these destinations where, and especially Australia, where after mining, education has got a huge impact on the GDP, will be impacted this year. And we'll see that despite offering online courses, what we have found is that students are not, while they're keen for online classes, they're also asking other questions on the quality, accessibility. And one of the biggest challenge for Indian students, particularly what we found, is the connectivity constraints we have pan-India. Everyone we surveyed has some form of issue with connectivity, and that problem is much deeper than just getting a connection. It's availability, it's power supply, cable cuts, transmission problems, signal problems, and so on. So I think there are several issues in this one question, and I've just kind of touched the surface for you, Akram.
Thank you. Professor Raj?
Yes.
Given our healthcare system, how deep is going to this COVID crisis is going to impact on Indian education?
So I think, Akram, we are a country which is used to dealing with different forms of crisis. I would say that there is a lot of inbuilt resilience in our country. And I think one of the remarkable ways that we have seen is that despite all the challenges that Ashwin just talked about, I can also see enormous hope. We have been, let me tell you that the Minister of Human Resource Development and the Honorable Minister for Human Resource Development has been leading from the front. I have personally participated in 3 or 4 meetings which she has taken. I know that many organizations, including regulatory bodies such as UGC, but also others, are all doing their best. The Association of Indian Universities is also bringing together the vice chancellors of various institutions. And there's a lot of energy and dynamism that is emerging out of the institutional, apparatus itself. Of course, we cannot underestimate the challenge, and there is no doubt about the fact that we need to reimagine different types of education. So one of the things that has happened, and let me try to give the positives because we all know the negatives. First and foremost, if you see universities, colleges, education institutions, including schools, for example, soon after the announcement of the lockdown, very quickly, a large number of them, I'm not saying all of them, a large number of them moved into online education, keeping in mind certain fundamental challenges that we face in India with regard to electricity or internet access, bandwidth speed, or other types of things. People have hitherto did not have even training and capacity building programs for pursuing online education, but they suddenly wanted to do something so that they become useful and relevant for students, and that an entire academic year is not lost. Secondly, I think if you see the way government has responded, several weeks ago, the Honorable Finance Minister announced a major initiative in which over 230 Indian universities are being empowered as we speak to offer online degrees as well. It was and the entire gamut of schemes such as the Prime Minister's e-Vidya program, to Swayam platforms, to other forms of electronic databases are all being beefed up as we speak, so that education could be offered online. Now, of course, nobody can say with clarity what is going to happen to the coming academic year, but all indications are that there will be a lot of blended learning opportunity that is coming. In colleges and universities are also responding to the extent they can by recognizing the unprecedented nature of the problem that we are facing. And there is a problem we cannot deny it. At one level, all of us in universities spend our entire lifetime trying to uphold to those academic standards, those importance of teaching pedagogy, assessments, examination, grading, and all of that. We do a lot to maintain that. And suddenly you have a COVID situation which challenges everything that we have always thought of, which is about examinations and assessment and grading, and are being asked to reimagine our entire educational structure. And that change is not going to come easily. So in some ways, a balance that universities and colleges are striking as we speak, and that's why all of us need to accept the complexity involved in this decision making, is that how do you provide that freedom and flexibility and create innovation, and adapt to the situation, at the same time not to so fundamentally undermine the academic standards so that we become less relevant, or at least what we teach for our students and how we assess them become irrelevant in the future. So to conclude on your question, I will say all stakeholders need to step back a bit and think and reflect. People who are the student community should become much more understanding and appreciate the difficult circumstances under which universities are functioning. University faculty members and administration should become more flexible and appreciate the challenging times that the students are facing. Regulatory bodies and government agencies should become much more flexible and appreciative of both the viewpoints of the student body on the one hand and the faculty and institutions. And we need to build consensus on the basis of greater trust and greater understanding of each other.
Yeah, Dr. Ashwin, would you like to say?
Yeah, so I think I will also to add on to what Mr. Raj said. What we did was we did a review and a certification of Indian institutions which are actually ready for e-learning at this time. And while India might not have been on par with their Western or Eastern counterparts for e-learning before COVID-19, I think COVID-19 has been a great enabler for India to fast track its e-learning capabilities by, I think, a few years, if I can be allowed to say that. Because what we found is that the moment schools and universities and colleges locked down in early March, we've seen that there was a shift from face-to-face to online, which happened almost simultaneously. And some of the institutions from this list, probably like OP Jindal, which adopted technology and embedded it in the curriculum previously. Some institutions did a shift almost immediately by adopting some of the world-class technology available out there. I think the platform that we found most used in India were Moodle, Blackboard. Some institutions were using even in-house platforms. But interestingly, for interaction, what we found, and you'll find it quite interesting, is that the most common platform for virtual meetings, even in second and third tier cities, because we're not just looking at the big universities, we're looking at universities beyond this, was the use of WhatsApp, and how WhatsApp was able for the faculty not just to connect with the students on a one-to-one, provide them on counseling and advising, but also organize small session groups on WhatsApp, because you probably are aware that WhatsApp also now allows multiple calling with, I think, more than 10 or 11 people in the same group call, and perhaps it's increased as we are speaking today. So that has been one of the major things which has come out through our e-lead, e-learning excellence for academic digitization certification of Indian institutions. Over 70 of them have undergone this process. 45 have already been certified. And what we did was we looked at some of the global best practices. We brought them to India and we said, well, this is what you need to do in order to be ready to offer programs on par with what anybody else globally would do for online education. And that's been interesting because adoption of LMS perhaps is something not everybody would think of. Beyond that, also looking at anti-privacy, looking at data backups and so on. So that has readied Indian institutions. I'm proud that that should support Indian institutions to offer online programs as UGC has mandated for the top institutions in India, and also those who would like to offer it for partial programs as well. So I think that's remarkable, Akram, and I think something which we need to note on accomplishment for Indian institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. I think wonderful. We already started receiving a couple of questions. We will come back to all these questions and with answers. We'll seek answers from our experts today. After the normal some questions that I have to ask to set the tone. One phenomena I saw when I was watching or reading, in fact, the QS ranking 2020 world ranking, we saw that IITs have ranked there, and a couple of Indian universities have ranked in the global ranking. And they are Delhi University, I think BHU, and then Calcutta University of Calcutta, Jadavpur University. JNU, I didn't see JNU in that thing. Then I see the NIRF ranking where JNU is somewhere on top, but it was not there in the QS ranking. So now India is a diverse country, and so like we have 1,000 universities, I think, but the nature, the scale of these universities are completely diverse. And sometimes I really wonder, like Jadavpur University doesn't have a very big campus. Delhi University is like divided into a lot of colleges. There are some central universities like Jamia, whose structure is very different. Now, how do we actually draw comparison from a Jadavpur University with a Delhi University, which doesn't have, which is not a central university, which has many colleges, and then OP Jindal Global University or Jindal University, like the Jamia Millia University, and then Aligarh Muslim University, and then there are hundreds of private universities with the different like fees brackets. And there are a lot of such diversity. How do you actually give the comparison in such a manner? And then how do you see the actual presence of Indian university from the global context?
Is it me or Ashwin?
Yeah, I think Professor Raj can give.
Okay, very good. All right. Thank you so much. Akram, it's a fantastic question. It's a very important question. I'll leave Ashwin to answer the question about the methodology and the reason why JNU was probably not just ranked, but they were not even, I suppose, they were not eligible to be ranked, if I remember correctly. It's nothing to do with, JNU is a world-class university, and there is no second opinion anywhere, whether in India or around the world. Having said that, you are absolutely right to say that there are a diversified set of universities in India. Diversity not only in terms of what they do, but how they are structured, how they are funded, what kind of disciplines they have, what kind of governments and governance operates there. All of that, there is diversity there. And of course, not to speak about the most obvious one, which is the public and the private. But first of all, you should understand what are we trying to do when we think about rankings. The purpose of any global rankings organization is not to understand the nuanced issues that individual universities are facing when it comes to their performance, their funding, their own governance structure within every country in the world. There are 200 countries in the world. There are some 35,000 plus universities approximately in the world. And India has, as you rightly said, 1,000 plus universities or so. So from a ranking standpoint, it is not their business to understand, oh, this is actually Nigeria, and Nigeria has this degree of gross domestic product, their income level is this much, they are suffering from so much of poverty, and Sri Lanka has this problem, Afghanistan and Pakistan have these problems. That's not their business. So let's not try to this is not their job, and that's not what they are claiming to do. They are basically using a set of benchmarks and some methodologies. You may agree or disagree, you may like it or not, to assess universities at its global level. So, for example, today, if our Prime Minister is very, very conscious of the World Bank index, the doing business, it's something called the efficiency of business rankings. And India has improved from, say, 100 or more in the last 6 years or 5 years to now 63. Now, you cannot go and tell World Bank, India is a very poor country, and, we have so many problems, and our poverty challenges are significant. That's not what you may choose, and you may decide, I don't care about this World Bank rankings, or I don't care about the UNDP's Human Development Rank. You can do that. But what you cannot do, and this is my disappointment occasionally, and that is why our current HRD minister is very clear, and time and again we have interacted with him. He has been absolutely clear that he keeps on mentioning that, and Prime Minister too, that we want to engage with the world. If we want to benchmark with universities around the world, we need to participate in rankings. We need to understand their methodology. We need to understand their functioning. We need to improve our quality. We need to invest in research. We need to internationalize. We need to have international faculty. We need to have international research. We need to have Scopus publications. We need to do everything that will enable our universities to be part of the rankings. But that does not mean that the rankings will solve the larger problem that we have in India when it comes to quality and excellence. And you are so right to say that a large part of Indian universities need to cater to the challenges, goals, and aspirations of a lot of people in India. The challenge we face today is that 850 million people in India are less than 35 years of age. The demographic dividend that we have need to educate all these young people, and not all universities need to be global universities, and you also should not assume that excellence should be the prerogative of only global universities. You can have different standards of excellence. So, for example, you can say that the IOEs, as they have said, or the ones which are ranked higher in any other rankings, they need to be assessed with this benchmark. And that's why the IOE policy is another good, landmark policy, because they said, listen, we want to identify 20 universities, 10 public and 10 private, give them autonomy, give them freedom, and set targets for them. If you want to be an IOE, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. And that's their benchmark. But not all of them need to be. In some ways, we need to do two big things. One, the ones which are doing very well, we need to promote them and make them even better. That's the challenge of world-class benchmarked institutions. The second and more important thing which we need to do is the ones which are terrible, they absolutely are mediocre. They offer absolutely mediocre education, and there are many of them, colleges, universities. We need to improve them, not to make them world class. That's not what the objective should be. To ensure that all of them have minimum standards. I'll give you a very good example. One of the remarkable things about the US higher education is that there are, of course, all of us will know the Harvard, the Yale, the Stanford, the Columbia, the Berkeley, and all of that. But I tell you, there are 150 universities in the United States which are like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. That is the beauty of US universities. You might know Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, but if you start assessing them on the quality of education that is offered, on the minimal standards of excellence that are infused, the University of Arizona, the Arizona State University, the Indiana University, the names you won't even, some of them you may not have heard. Many people in India may not have heard. 150, maybe more. The small liberal arts colleges, hundreds of them, they are all fantastic. So we need to draw that inspiration and democratize the entire higher education system to have all of our universities to have minimum standards, some of them benchmarking internationally.
Yeah, Dr. Ashwin. Now the problem is, does the diversity make it complicated for you in the global ranking?
Yeah, exactly. So valid points, Prof. Raj, and I think I agree with you on all of those. And I think I'll give another example, and I give this in my presentations. We have the World Cup, and the World Cup is played across the world every 5 years, and every country that wants to qualify for the World Cup has to play the same game. There isn't a game which says, okay, I am from India, I cannot, or I'm from a smaller country. We don't have the facilities to buy sports accessories. We can't practice in world-class stadiums, so we can't play the same game. We will play a lesser time, or you can give me another team which has got lesser abilities or lesser build. We can't do that because we are playing one game. And I think that's what exactly the world university rankings are. We are looking at who are the best universities globally. And in that, we have to use one kind of measure. Now, in that case, you'll definitely have universities which are state funded or centrally funded. They are some are privately run, some are other challenges. And I think that is what the world ranking does not look at and measures everyone equally. Now, having said that, we also have regional rankings. We look at rankings, we look at universities in Asia and measure them separately with parameters which are designed for Asia. We have rankings for the Arab region, which look at different challenges, what the Arab region faces. We have a set of rankings for Latin America and for Eastern Europe. And recently, we have done a USA ranking as well. Now, people can say, well, these rankings are just there, people, we just produce it. But I think the idea is to help promote excellence in the smallest of universities on a national level or on a regional level for that matter, and to promote them and give them a push towards looking at what they are right now and where do they need to go. And we also, beyond rankings, now JNU is a very good institution, and I think if you were to rank them, we did some simulation, they would be really good, very well ranked in the ranking. But the criteria of the world university ranking is that you need to have both undergraduate and postgraduate courses. And that's the first, and I think with institutions which only offer postgraduate courses, we don't consider them for the world or the Asian ranking, because those are generally institutions meant for postgraduate students. They look at research, more intensive research. And I think for them, we are looking at subject-specific rankings, which you rank them in. And, tomorrow when JNU, they're already on the journey. They have engineering, which they have started the first batch last year or the year before last. They will be eligible for the rankings in due course, and we hope that they will get the due credit as well for them. That's one of the conditions what we look at for universities when we are going to rank them. Also, they need to offer both areas of 5 areas actually. We're looking at engineering and technology, life sciences and medicine, social science and management, natural sciences, and life sciences and medicine. And what did I miss out? Engineering and technology. So there are 5 areas. We look for at least 2 what the university needs to offer in order to rank them. So I have nothing more to add. I think it's already said very beautifully by Professor Raj, and I agree on most of the thoughts. We need to have one kind of measure. But for those institutions which want to improve, I think what the country is doing right now, what the MHRD is doing for education promotion, besides Swayam and whatever other platforms, also the satellite television. And I think I seen one comment earlier which said, how do you reach the poor? And that has been the challenge. There are several initiatives, and the government is also, I think, looking at right now how do they take education using satellite broadcasting to the villages, and also by radio and so on. So I think that the thing is still on. There is a challenge, but I think Indians are resilient, and we will come out victorious in the long run. And COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to turn things around.
Thank you. I think now I have 2 questions. I don't know whether should I ask both together or not, but let me separate them because they are 2 separate topics. One, but that is more important. As someone actually in our panel have already raised that question, India is a billion plus country. Talking from the context of India, and large number of people are poor and have limited 80% of Indian youth or the +2 level people, they don't go for higher education, are normally school dropouts, especially in the government school infrastructure. The ranking that I have seen mostly, the best universities ranking that I saw, are the ones who take the best students of the country, whether that is Delhi University, Jadavpur University, or these universities. They take the best of best talent of India. And I think they don't need any jobs after that. They know what they have to do, and they can crack a good job or a good degree or good with high percentage. My problem is with the 80% Indians who are dropouts at class 12 level. We are talking about the globalizing university. Now, a huge amount of this, huge gap of poor and rich. And now the gap would be the digital divide that is going to pose it. This actually is for Professor Raj, that how are we actually going to overcome this? This is a real serious practical crisis that we are facing.
Well, thank you so much, Akram. And I would say this, I've been thinking a lot about this for the last 11 years since I moved to India when we set up the Jindal Global University. So first of all, I personally think that you cannot address poverty without substantial and significant investment in education. So you can keep on doling out schemes, and that will temporarily help, but ultimately real empowerment of people will come through education, and more education. So it is actually not a chicken and egg problem. It is actually a very clear issue where if you really want to address poverty, address education. And whether it is a Pratham report or other reports, if you talk about the dropout situation, it's all coming down to a very simple point. We need to invest in education. I mean, for years together, educationists have talked about the fact that our GDP investment in education should be above 6%. But for years together, regardless of whichever government is in power, it has been never more than 3%. So the point is, you need to, and we need to understand that you cannot address poverty, unemployment, health, everything that you want to address, all the good things that we want in a good society without significant, substantial, and serious public and private investment in education at all levels. Second, we need to also recognize that all kinds of barriers that are existing today in our education system need to be removed. Barriers in relation to quality, accessibility, inclusion, everything that we have created so many barriers, some of them due to our historical context, some of them created through lack of proper policies in place. Whatever it is, we have too many barriers, we need to remove them. The third is that we need to, when we start investing in education, we need to look at education from a comprehensive and holistic standpoint. It cannot be so fragmented where there are some universities which are central universities, and then some of them are private and public and state and deemed and this and that. It becomes too difficult for our governance structure. The governance of our whole university system need to be reimagined with a much simpler approach towards governance. The regulation is such a nightmare for anybody, particularly honest and sincere and law-abiding people, to follow it, because it is so complex and complicated for people to follow. We need a huge regulatory reform which will address the governance challenge, which in turn will address the issue of funding as well. The third thing which I will say we need to do is we need to build more institutions. But that capacity cannot only arise out of the existing model of state funding or the more difficultly enabled model of private. We need more and more and larger private participation, but with a new imagination for improving the existing regulatory environment. The private university system today is largely divided into two. One, a good number of mediocre, for-profit and even dubious institutions in the private sector, and then another small and emerging group of private institutions which are more committed to a not-for-profit, philanthropic, excellence-oriented, access-oriented type institutions. We need to create new forms of incentives and approaches in governance. And the IOE scheme, the graded autonomy policy of the UGC and the NAC, all these things augur well for that. The fourth major reform that we need to address, and this is your question about the question of access. One of the tragedies of Indian higher education remain that a large number of people have been made to believe that the only progress towards achieving economic empowerment is to obtain mediocre degrees. And this has resulted in a situation across several states in India, whether it is Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan or even southern states. So much of data is that if you announce a job for office attendance and where the qualification is, let's say, a 9th grade or a 10th grade with an ability to drive a cycle, this remains the qualification. There are 10 to 15 lakhs people applying for 120 jobs. And among the 10 lakhs to 15 lakhs people, there are B.Eds and M.Eds. There are PhDs and MPhils. There are lakhs of master's degree holders. So there is a complete mismatch between the education that we are offering on the one hand in the universities and the aspirations that are being created, and even that is not being offered in an appropriate manner. There are not enough jobs out there, and government cannot be the only. Now that ties up with the ability of the private sector to create jobs, and in that process developing an economy that can actually create jobs which will absorb these large number of graduates. That takes me to a very important point in which we need to significantly, substantially, and seriously promote community colleges and vocational education. And in this regard, we need to draw experience from the United States and China. Today, what we don't realize is that one of the remarkable ways by which US higher education has grown is that they have created entry points into higher education from community colleges. So in some ways, not everybody needs to go into a typical university and end up getting a mediocre degree with little learning and end up becoming unemployed or most likely underemployed. And that happens to be the larger imagination. And there is social unrest among a lot of youth because they simply did not get the type of education. I'm not saying there are jobs even for, An IIM graduate may become maybe unemployed for a while. An IIT graduate maybe, and there in these situations they may be. But I would like to believe that the education that has been offered in these institutions would sufficiently empower them to have a meaningful pursuit in their life. But unfortunately, given the mediocrity challenge that prevails in our institutions, we need to develop community colleges not to become alternative mediocre institutions, but to actually develop absolutely world-class community colleges where we talked about skills in India. We've had the National Skills Development Corporation, the evolution of skills as a very critical component towards our new education policy. But the fact remains that we have not done enough to create world-class community colleges. Vocational training and vocational education and skills development in India, unfortunately, happens to be a bad word. It is a pejorative pursuit. It is not something that many people desire to pursue. Unless, now, for example, if you look at these design schools, I'll give you a very good example. They have almost 100% employment in many of these design schools because there is a lot of connectivity towards pursuit of employment connected to and integrated with the educational goal as well. In a way, what I'm trying to say is that we need to reform and reimagine our higher education system. But unfortunately, higher education does not operate in an isolated manner. You need to build the economy. You need to create jobs. You need to have higher growth in the economy. You need to invest in education. You need to have healthy people who can take up those jobs. You need to widen different sectors. You need to have greater public and private participation in sectors where you need to globalize and create jobs through external players coming in. We need to do that. So it is part, in some ways, I have always said this before, and of course nobody listens to, the Human Resource Development Ministry should be more important for a country like India than the Home Ministry and the Finance Ministry. So if I were to make a recommendation to the Prime Minister, he should make the most important and influential person, which he always, as a part of that HRD ministry. And we are very fortunate that a former Chief Minister is currently heading the HRD ministry. But the point I'm trying to say is the Human Resource Development Ministry is the most important ministry of a developing country because that's where everything happens, or at least everything should.
Normally the second best person gets the finance ministry. And I think the way Professor Raj has elaborated this question, I don't know how much is left for Dr. Ashwin, but how do we mitigate the economic and now the digital divide that this Indian society is going to face?
Yeah, I think, as you said, Professor Raj has answered most of it, but I think it's really comes down to the investment which the government has. And I think when we looked at the percentage of expenditure on higher education over the last 12 years, it has been an average of 1.47%. Now, when you compare that to Malaysia, for example, I'll give Malaysia because Malaysia has been one, and I'm using rankings in this case as a benchmark, has been the fastest rising country in the World University rankings this year. The government allocation for higher education has remained stagnant, and I think probably has dropped by 1.5%. I think over the last few years or so. But when we looked at the allocation in Malaysia, it's about 20% for the higher education sector, the largest allocation to any ministry, I'm told. Now we have a few Malaysians here, and probably they can validate this thing. But I think that investment into education will go a long way. The process of the regulation in the country is tough, and I think how can we look at a lens where we promote excellence even in smaller private universities, colleges, and perhaps look at a model where we can embrace rankings, and no doubt, and also look at ratings. I think the NAC accreditation is a form of a rating, I believe, which will allow institutions to embrace best practices and push the smaller institutions up. But I think more than that is also how the sectors like telecom and infrastructure are able to upgrade themselves and offer better for the country is also something what we're looking for. Despite all of this, all of the investment coming in, it is at a slow pace. My example, for example, I'm based in Bangalore at this time, and I'm unable to get a decent internet connection which doesn't drop at least 1 or 2 times a day. And on the days I'm lucky, there's just one time I get a drop. The days I'm unlucky, probably I lose it for an hour or so. And I'm in a mainstream city. So that infrastructure problem is going to be there despite whatever way we push. But I think as we proceed ahead, as the government invests more, and as we have institutions going now e-learning and trying to do things and emulate what the Western or Eastern counterparts are doing, I think the fruits will start bearing very soon, I believe. But there isn't a short-term solution for this, Akram.
Akram, I want to quickly add one thing, Akram, since you have raised this very important question, and I think it's in policy times. In 1963, I think in August 1963, it was, Martin Luther King gave a very famous speech at the Lincoln Memorial called I Have a Dream. And he mentioned many things in it. And he said in this I Have a Dream speech, he talked about the fact that he had a dream in which his 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And he mentioned many other things. So I have a dream. The dream I have is that India has to assume a leadership role in the world of higher education. And we can. There is an extraordinary potential for us to assume leadership role for a number of reasons. First, we have a civilizational leadership role that we have played. Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila predates Oxford and Bologna, when the entire Western world had no idea, no clue, even the slightest of imagination of such scholarly thinking in disciplines ranging from philosophy to algebra to many other areas. We had our true global university over 2000 years ago. So it was not as if that we are trying to do something now. Second, the extraordinary demographic dividend that we have today. As I said, 850 million people, less than 35 years of age, 1.3 billion population, life expectancy increased to 73, most parts of Western world, including China and Japan, becoming older, and India being younger and younger for a longer time. Third, India's reputation for being a democratic, inclusive, pluralistic, diverse, and non-confrontational, peace-loving country. Without naming any other names, let me tell you that this credential of India can be a very important part of our future aspiration. Fourth, the extraordinary contribution of Indians when they get opportunities to be educated and doing the best. I mean, this is something which we don't realize it, but be it, the Nadelas and the Sundar Pichais, these are not Indian Americans. These are Indians born and brought up and studied in schools and colleges in India and went abroad for graduate education and did well and ended up doing what they are doing. So this is not something that is beyond the horizon. So there is extraordinary talent available. And the fifth, which I think is very important, is that, and this is where the HRD ministry becomes the most important ministry, is that think about the future. Australia, a small country of probably 20 plus million people, like Delhi, Australia in many ways higher education exports contributes towards Australia's second highest contributor to GDP. Internationalization of education is being such a big deal. I saw data that last year alone, United States international students have contributed over $43 billion. So what I'm trying to tell you is, for the large part of Africa, all of South Asia, many parts of Middle East, and certain parts of Asia, India can be the beacon of providing world-class education at a cost that is 1/6 of or 1/7 of what the United States, the Canada, the Western Europe, and Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Taipei, and Australia, New Zealand can offer. But for this, we need to reimagine our mindset and develop a tectonic shift in our attitude, in our approach, and in our governance. That's my dream.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful dream, and I second you on this. I think if we can become like that, nothing can give more happiness and peace and satisfaction. And that is one of the core objectives of the Policy Times. And we will do that and keep doing that as long as we achieve it. Dr. Ashwin, I want to come to this very pertinent question. A lot in India, a lot of VCs, even vice chancellors, pro VCs, I have often heard saying, we don't care about the global ranking. We are providing the best that we can. Now, do you think this thing is a correct connotation or correct thinking or something? Or how much importance should we give in the global ranking?
Oh, well, that's a good question, Akram. And I think those who do not believe in rankings, basically, perhaps for them at this time, international benchmark, and it depends on which ranking they're talking about. If they're talking of international rankings, or they're talking rankings as a whole, or they're talking of Indian rankings or Asia rankings. So I think for them, my message would be that they need to have some form of benchmarking. And I think the first thing is they need to see what their mission and vision is. And if their mission and vision is to be global, is to become a world-class institution, to get internationally recognized, then definitely they need to have, if not rankings, they need to have some form of benchmarking to give them evidence that they are on the path to being world-class. And there's a famous quote which says, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So I think there is a contradiction when institutions or VCs say we're not interested in rankings, they are an international conspiracy, or words like that. But their mission and vision states that we want to be a world-class institution. Now, that's where the contradiction is. And I think for them, I would like to say that if not rankings, then you have to find something that sails your boat, because you need, and we can all previously, when there was no internet or when accessibility or availability of information was limited, you could say you're the best. And I've found this case several times. I mean, I've traveled to over 250 universities across Middle East, North Africa, and some in South Asia, where even as early as 8 years ago, people believed that they were the best, and there was nothing to prove that where they are standing at the moment, even in the country and so on. Rankings, while not being perfect, I'm not saying that they're perfect, have given some kind of a lens into institutional performance, are looking at broader parameters. Now, if not for the world's, they'll feature in regional rankings. And while at the moment there are no priorities for them, for rankings, and they should have some form of benchmarking which will tell you how good you are as compared to your peers. So if it's not for QS, you might try to look at NRF and try to benchmark against institutions there. And if you believe that you're going to be an institution which is going to be purely teaching, I'm not going to be looking at research, then maybe rankings are not meant for you at all, because the whole purpose of ranking is that we're looking at institutions which have an international footprint for research and teaching, and have global recognition for that. So I think that's my clear message to those VCs in this case.
Akram, I will add one more thing, Akram. You see, now this is not an option anymore. private universities can have the luxury of deciding whether they want to be part of private rankings or not. But as far as public universities are concerned, the government has clearly articulated a viewpoint all the way from the Prime Minister, the President of India, the HRD Minister, the HRD Secretary, the UGC Chairman, NAC Chairman. Everybody has very clearly said that we need to benchmark ourselves, both domestically and internationally. As far as publicly established institutions through taxpayers' money are concerned, whether it is an IIT or an IIM or a central university or a state public university, they have a duty and an obligation. It is not a choice for them to be part of rankings. They have a duty and an obligation to measure their performance through established rankings, whether it is QS or Times Higher Education or Shanghai Jiatong rankings, or if they want to establish themselves domestically. The higher the institutions are, there is a duty and an obligation to benchmark themselves internationally. And that is why the ranking conversation is no longer an option for people. And that is why in the IOE process, there has been a Gazette notification in which the rankings are not an option. If you are an IOE, you better subject yourself to international rankings and benchmark yourself internationally. And public universities which get money, again, have a statutory, a legal duty and a regulatory obligation to participate in international rankings. It is not an option for them to decide whether they want to. It could have been A, if it was a private university. B, now if they were not part of IOE. And even if they are not part of IOE, the thinking in the government is to constantly benchmark institutions to different standards. So, for example, they may insist on an NAIOF, or they may insist on a NAC A accreditation, or they may insist on graded autonomy or whatever. But all aspects of this, whether it is domestic rankings, international rankings, accreditation process, these are no longer going to be on the whims and fancies of institutional heads. They become both legal and moral duty and obligation of every institution.
Excellent view coming. I do not ask any more questions further from my end. Let me take a couple of questions from our audience. Can we take a couple of voice questions also? If
sure. Please, no problem.
We can take. So, a couple of questions and observation putting to you. So, Rashmi ma'am is a principal of a school. She asks that this webinar meeting is related to many subjects and leading topics which are required. I would request all our viewers, so when you come to video, don't come to video unless you are asking questions. Kindly keep your video off. When you are asking question, you can come in your video. This way, our speakers will be less distracted actually. So, okay, so a lot of Professor Khairuddin is asking something. Hi, I'm brilliant, and okay. I will take questions first, and then can free and compulsory education? Dr. Mohan is asking. Can free and compulsory education, higher education, would make the situation better by forcing the governments to allocate more for education?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, compulsory word is more complicated. In the question of primary and secondary education, we have done that. But I am all in favor. In fact, I'll go a step further. Let me give you a very good example. I studied in Delhi University, and I received the standardized fee structure that we have in our public universities need to be revisited. I come from a middle class family in India. My father is a professor. My mother is a doctor. And there are people with me whose parents are plumbers and electricians. I am paying the same fee as they are paying. They should be given free education and I should be charged more. So the whole fee structure of our public universities need to be completely reimagined. In fact, there were people who are much more wealthier than me, who could afford, who ended up spending 10 times more for their school education, ended up spending a few hundred rupees. So the first and foremost thing is, ultimately government's money has to come from some source, right? Nobody has unlimited resources. So I am all in favor of free education for our people who can't afford. But they need to have a means-tested policy on the basis of income tax returns or other type of things, so that the needy and those who cannot afford is not subsidized, is given free education. They should be given free education. And those who can afford should not be subsidized, should be given. And there will be a gradation. Fees will be paid, differential fee structure. So you do a differential fee structure. In public universities, by the way, I'm not private anyways, is not getting any government funding, so they will charge their fee. But I'm talking about public. So then you can actually have resources which can then be usefully spent. The resource question is so important. We really need to restructure our resource question. Part of the problem is that we have not been able to tap into the corporate social responsibility, funding. We have a situation where crores and crores of rupees have come through the CSR legislation that we have gotten. That money, in my view, we should have an amendment to the legislation, and 50% of that money should mandatorily go to education. Right now, that's not the case. You can build roads, you can do, build parks, and you can contribute to Prime Minister's Relief Fund and all kinds of things. But 50% of the CSR funding, in my view, should go into education. See, basically, Akram, if you really want to build a next generation, in knowledge society, a society where human development is valued, all our priorities should focus on education. Because when you do education, you also contribute to health, you also contribute to employment, you contribute to broader elements of development. The second thing on the funding should be that we need to create affordability through a significant investment when it comes to persuading rich people to make contribution. Now, we were fortunate, our benefactor, Mr. Naveen Jindal, was generous enough to put in resources and create. But there are not too many of them. There are few of them before and few of them now. But by and large, in a country of billion plus people, there are not enough multi-millionaires who have come forward to invest in education. All of them do not need to create universities. For example, many years ago, the Planning Commission, the then Planning Commission, set up a committee headed by Dr. Narayana Murthy, or Mr. Narayana Murthy, who is the Infosys. The Narayana Murthy committee recommended that there should be 300% tax rebate for people who are contributing to universities. Basically, you create, incentives so that we create a fund, and the fund we should develop, in my view, a 1 lakh crore fund that will actually invest in different forms of educational initiatives, from investing in creating universities, in investing in scholarship for students, investing in hiring faculty, investing in contributing to research, investing in even funding education for some of our students who can't afford. The best of them should be funded even going abroad. Singapore did it for a very long time. Even now they do a bit, with commitments to come back and contribute to the development of Singapore. We need to reimagine and have I have a dream Martin Luther King type situation.
Thank you. For Dr. Ashwin, I have one additional question along with this, if you want to touch upon, is that Open University has also played a tremendous role in reskilling the students, that one of our participants have asked. The name is not revealed, but so do you also bring all these Open Universities in the ranking?
Yeah, so touching upon the first question, I think it's important, and there are several studies which have shown the importance of alumni in funding, and I think in the US that model has been very successful. It's also started to be successful in places like Hong Kong, where the universities have really tried to tap on the alumni network, and I think that's also the trend that just started in India. And I was just told a few weeks ago when I met one of the IIT directors that they have started to reach out to even their current alumni to be able to ask them to participate in various activities and to fund various projects. So I think that has to go beyond that in terms of creating an endowment fund, how they can make it bigger, and be that has been, I think, that should be the starting point, is to tap into the alumni network. And India has many billionaires, and I think which they are probably started their own universities. How can you get them to be involved in education? I think that was one of the philanthropic activities have to increase in South Asia. It's happening in a few countries and a few cities. There's small pockets here and there, but that will be a really great step. Coming to the next question of online education, I think I do see the time as well right now, and I think that I would like to touch upon very quickly on online education. Traditionally, we have never included open or online institutions in rankings. Now, there are various reasons why, and I think you probably already know. When you look at online institutions, one is that they're not research intensive, or they probably don't do any research. Second, most of the curriculum is done either to a blended mode or online mode, maybe. And there's also, I'm talking globally. Open education has been more of a fast and easy approach to getting your degree. So perhaps that is changing, and I think we are at QS. We do have an online MBA, an executive MBA ranking. We do an online master's ranking as well. So those who want to go and look at it can look at topmba.com to look at those rankings more on the business side. But I think beyond that, we have gone into ratings. So we are looking at QS stars for online institutions, because online is just, you can't just pick up information on public sources. You need to be able to do a very comprehensive research into how they are doing the online programs, what technology they're using, what do the current students think of the technology, what are the opportunities they have after doing the course, and I think it goes beyond ranking, where we can measure a few available international parameters into more in-depth assessment using QS Stars Online, or we have the e-lead in India, which is e-learning excellence for academic digitization, wherein we are embracing those institutions which are offering either online or blended learning. So the time probably in the future will be very soon, where we might have a ranking of universities who offer online programs completely. We don't know. COVID situation has been very volatile. We thought it's going to be here for a short while, but looks like it's here to stay, and it's going to be part of the new normal. And perhaps it's too early for us to judge what will be the change ranking agencies will make. Perhaps this could be the gap year where we don't capture data from this year. We start looking. We take last year's data and still compare institutions, because we still don't know when COVID-19 is going to go away. So that's my concluding remarks for you, Akram. You're muted.
Sorry, yeah. I'll take just one question, and then I'll request you for the concluding remarks. So Shreya Satam ma'am has asked one question, I think, is, will COVID-19 deglobalize private universities world? Because this will certainly discourage a lot of international travel and all. So, Professor Raj.
All right, let's break up this question into two phases. The reality is that there is no doubt about the fact that COVID-19 crisis that we are facing right now, we are probably 4 or 5 months into it, and if this is going to go for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we are looking at, let's say, a worst case scenario. I do believe that the during COVID-19 phase and post-COVID-19 phase is going to be two different ones. In during COVID-19 phase, there is no doubt about the fact that internationalization, which the type of internationalization which depends on mobility, including international travel and visas and immigration and all of that, will suffer and suffer significantly. It has already happened. Me and a colleague of mine wrote an article on study in India, stay in India, why. We wrote this literally 3.5 months ago in Times of India. And everything that we predicted at that time has come true now. So basically, that is going to be the reality. At that time when we wrote, my friends in the US were very skeptical, but then now it's all happening as we speak. So there is going to be that aspect. But I do believe that we have come to a stage where internationalization in universities, but also in the world, is an irreversible phenomenon. The nature and the context and the contours of internationalization will go through some transition, but we will bounce back. Because fundamentally, the DNA of universities are so much tied to internationalization and globalism. Depending upon resources and depending upon opportunities, individual institutions will have to make choices. And as far as we are concerned, we are as excited as we were when we started, and we expect this trend to continue, while we will, like everybody else, will retrace some of our steps during the COVID phase, because there are externalities which will impact our effort to promote internationalization. But I do not believe that in the long term there will have any consequences whatsoever negatively for internationalization. Rather, the COVID-19 will actually give us more hope and opportunity for recognizing how we are interconnected as a community, how researchers need to come together to, let's say, produce the next vaccine, how companies and governments need to come together to ensure that everybody in this planet is able to have access to those vaccines. So I expect the post-COVID-19 phenomenon to have developed even stronger approach towards internationalization, not just in universities, but even beyond.
Thank you. I think one of our teachers, Shalu Singh, has requested that lack of teachers and professors in the higher education system will be a major drawback. One participant has also asked, will COVID-19 destabilize education for the poor? I want to say that we at Policy Times, we have taken a Million Smile campaign where we have tied up with some IT companies to provide affordable laptop to the poor of the poorest ones at a very subsidized rate. And we are also trying to tie up with the state governments or central governments so that we can, half of the rate can be taken care of by the governments or CSR companies, and half of the rates can be affordable or can be paid by the parents. And we are targeting the real poor government schools across the rural India, maybe in Bengal, in Northeast, because if we can't, so only problem in India is that lot of startups have started coming up with software solutions for education, but unless we make the hardware available to our kids, software is not going to bring solution. I don't want to go deep into that. We have already crossed time, and I'll come to the final question, concluding remarks. Maybe Dr. Ashwin first, because for Professor Kumar, I have a separate question for JGU. So the question for Kumar is, what is the redefined role of critical or typical Indian stakeholders to globalize Indian universities?
Well, I think first and foremost thing is you need to start benchmarking. In the current scenario, even previously and even in the future, you need to start benchmarking with your peers, with the best. And I think the kind of opportunity India has at the moment, and I call it the second wind for higher education in India, because we've got an opportunity to pause things globally. There isn't international mobility going to happen right now. We have the opportunity to get the best students who would go abroad, attract them to Indian institutions, and keep them in India by offering them good quality higher education. So there's an opportunity, there's a huge gap there for us at the moment to fill in. Institutions need to start looking at what do foreign or institutions in the West generally or in Australia offer, and how that could be emulated in the Indian higher education system, be it the curriculum, be it technology, be it the employability opportunities, the skill development, and so on, and offer that to the Indian students to be able to manage this gap year and probably to stay on with you. And I think that will also give an opportunity to get experts to come in over video conferencing systems, reimagining internationalization by getting renowned international faculty to train classes in India, and perhaps also look at getting international students to come in as well, to various other sources, to online. And I think there's a great opportunity here to grab the spot what India has and had in the ancient times. And I think it all starts with starting to look at where we are right now and where do we need to go. And benchmarking, rankings, rating, accreditation will all play a role in telling you the path to getting there. And I think that's probably where we are right now. So that's my concluding words. Use your whatever means you have to choose your path.
Thank you. In addition to the question of globalizing, or redefining the role of Indian stakeholders to globalize Indian universities, I have a question like, you are a gifted talent of India when it comes to the education sector. And you have been also being fortunate to be the youngest founding VC of any truly global university from India. Now, how has been your experience in setting up that university? So I have a dream message that you have conveyed is super, but other than that, what kind of entrepreneurs or visionaries that you look forward to see, and a message for them, how can we truly build international universities at the most affordable rate or situation?
So thank you so much, Akram, for that, and thank you for Policy Times. So first of all, I think we need to move out of this constant effort to deal with good, important problems only when there is a crisis. Now, think about it. Our Prime Minister really worked hard in a way, and I really liked when he did that, when he talked about Swachhta, the Swachhta campaign. But, with all due respect, not many people listened. And today, with what is happening through COVID-19, the whole campaign of Swachhta has acquired a very important significance, where cleanliness has become a very strong part of people's imagination. And public health experts, doctors, policymakers, public policy people have for years together talked about why we need to develop a public health infrastructure better. We have a totally dysfunctional public health system. We know that. But now, with so much of TV time on public health and corona, we are all familiar with public health. So in a way, the first point is we need to get over this crisis-based governance, where we will govern only when there is a crisis. So education cannot be a crisis-based governance. So today we are running helter-skelter. How do we do online education? Should we do online education or not? Should we have blended learning or not? Should we have online exams or not? These are issues where we need to have thought through before and should be thinking through now and should continue to think through post-corona. That's the first point I would say. Second, as far as our institution is concerned, listen, we are very fortunate that way, and we are fortunate at multiple levels. I was deeply inspired by the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. It was established nearly 2 decades ago, and they had a vision, and people like Pramad Sinha and many others created that institution completely outside India's regulatory environment. It does not offer degrees. It cannot offer diplomas. It is not approved by any regulatory body outside the ministry system, in a country where everybody is obsessed with approval and license and accreditation and notification and this and that. They created an institution which is totally outside regulatory environment and became world class. So that was a very important part of our vision from day one. And of course, as we evolved, we were very fortunate to begin with. Our founding chancellor and benefactor not only provided the financial resources, but he made a commitment to providing academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and independence, empowering the university to achieve great heights and take decisions on its own. This single biggest act of philanthropy and autonomy enabled us to travel this journey. I can only say that over the last decade, we have seen good institutions emerging in India, and I would count our neighboring university, Ashoka University, another university in Greater Noida, Shiv Nadar University, Azim Premji University, some of the new evolving institutions. These are all based upon a philosophy of not-for-profit, private, philanthropic, public-oriented, excellence-seeking, internationally benchmarked type of institution with strong emphasis on high-quality faculty, high-quality students, and high-quality teaching, and finally, high-quality engagement at all levels. The future, I believe, is going to be a lot of private universities emerging. Unless, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, unless we develop significant public investment in higher education. Public investment in higher education cannot substitute our higher education system by private means. Private universities should come and good ones should emerge. The bad ones should either disappear or should be closed down. But we need to develop a hybrid model. The future, I believe, is going to be based upon our ability to focus on human resource development through building absolutely fantastic universities and empowering good universities to become better. This is the only way by which not only can we address the problem of quality and excellence that we talked about today, but also address the problem of unemployment as well as futures for our young people, and also address the big challenges of economic and social and other forms of development that is staring at India. So in a way, the dream that I shared with you is not something that cannot be achieved. It is within our means. If we can do it, everybody can do it. What we have done in 11 years, if we can do, imagine in a sleepy town of Sonipat, where nothing was there, we created something. And today, in 11 years, our university has grown from, say, 100 students to nearly 6,500 students, from, say, 10 faculty members to 600 faculty members, from, literally a 50-acre campus to a 100-acre campus, moving towards a 300-acre campus, from 100,000 square feet of built-up space to over 2 million square feet of built-up space, from no ranking presence to be now present in BRICS and Asia, and then to be ranked #1 law school in India, and to globally ranked as top 21 in the top 1,000, and to be India's #1 private university, and to get the NAC accreditation, highest grade, and to get graded autonomy, and to receive IOE. Everything happened in 11 years. To have 16% of our full-time faculty members who are non-Indian nationals recruited from 32 different countries and regions in the world, who have relocated to Sonipat, Haryana, and made their home, and have made Sonipat an intellectual capital of the world. If that has been possible by one institution, and there are few more stories in India, everybody and every institution can achieve that.
I think that's a brilliant and inspirational, message that came in the end from you. A very high quality and rich discussion by two of our experts, Professor Rajkumar and Dr. Ashwin Fernandez. Thank you so much. This was our first Policy Times VCs Roundtable, and we got one of the best from India.
Thank you, Akram, for your leadership and for your fantastic work. You have our full support, and we will always be supporting in all your initiatives.
Thank you so much, Professor Raj. Viewers, if you like, Policy Times is committed to bring development or give a development direction to the country. And we want to bring the real talent of India from the ground, who are actually showing a path to you and present the model in front of you, so that the country, beautiful country like India, gets a real direction of growth and prosperity. Thank you so much, Professor Raj, and Dr. Ashwin. We'll be in touch with you. And thank you so much for the support. Viewers, keep watching the Policy Times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
सर हो गया सर